Hello everyone! Today on Saga Scribe, we interview Kia Leep, author of Glass Kanin, which is now available for purchase, as well as Friendly Fire. It was impressive. It was only one episode, but yeah, anyway, Kia, it's so nice to meet you. First and foremost, I just wanted to ask you, what inspired you to first start writing? I'm gonna start this a little easier, right? So, like, what started you with Glass Kanin, and then now you've extended the universe into Friendly Fire. So, can you tell me a little bit, like, what inspired you to write that kind of story?
Oh boy, it's been a long, winding road. So I've always been writing since I was a kid, and it was kind of like something that I always knew that I wanted to do one day. One day, you'd publish a book. And in my early 20s, I kind of started getting more into it and being like, you know what, I'm going to like seriously pursue traditional publishing. I'm going to like submit to all these agents. And like I spent a lot of time like joining critique groups and refining my writing and sending out to all of these agents and even like publishers and small presses. And I got into mentorship programs. The book didn't get picked up, but I got close. So then I wrote another book and I got that in another program and it got even closer. And through this whole process, like after 3 or 4 books that I'd written and shopped around and getting like so close every time,
Yeah.
I burnt out. Like I was in the middle of writing the next book that I was going to send to agents, and I was sitting there thinking, okay, what does the agent want? What is going to make this more appealing to them? Like what does the industry want? Like this is what I want to write, but this isn't what, would sell. And then I caught myself and I'm like, this isn't what I want to do.
Yeah,
I
fair
don't want
enough.
to be like writing like and making myself miserable by tailoring everything to what I think the agent wants. And I was like, so I just took a break, and this was almost exactly 2 years ago. It was a little bit after Thanksgiving break in 2022.
Hmm.
And yeah, I was just like, I'm tired. I'm just going to do something else. Like, no pressure, no expectations. I'm just going to write something silly and ridiculous and fun. And I had read a couple lit RPGs before that, and I knew it was like a growing genre, and it was just different enough that I wanted to do something unlike anything else that I was currently working on, just to give myself space. And so like impulsively I just started writing Glass Kanin. I think I like found the notes for like where that idea came from this last year, and it was like a jot, just like a line in my enormous book ideas like notebook that I have, and it was like, person gets stuck in small glass bottle, question mark, has to make a bigger body. And like that's where it started from. So yeah, the premise of the book itself is that a guy's soul gets stuck in a glass bottle when he dies and gets isekai'd to a fantasy world, and then he has to survive and trying to find a way to get his body back. And then when that doesn't work, he tries to find a way to just improve his current body. And so it was a lot of fun. It started really silly, and then as I was writing the first book, I was like, all right, let's develop this into, where do I want the series to go? And as I was brainstorming that, I started coming up with all of these other ideas for stories too,
Hmm.
different lit RPG and isekai stories, and I realized that I could fuse them all into one universe.
Yes, yeah.
So that's where like Friendly Fire came from, and A Little Salty, and there's a third book as well I'm about to publish in the next couple of weeks that's called Knight in Shining Armor. Um, and so those three are basically all spin-offs of the Glass Kanin series, and they all take place in the same universe, and eventually they will be crossing over into each other's stories as well. So yeah, it just kind of like grew out of proportion.
That's awesome,
as
though.
as I was starting to write it. It just kept getting bigger and bigger, but it was a lot of fun, and it was fun to jump around between projects too.
You figured out how to, like, interweave all the different projects into one giant scope, right?
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, like I think I did it a little like too rigidly. Like I had this idea of like, why all these other characters got isekai'd, and then I had an image in my head of like, how their storylines would cross. But when I was putting out these 3 side books too, I was also like, all right, well, I'll plan like one book to start their journey and one book to wrap it up. And if it gets popular and people like it, then I will extend it to more. I won't just do one book to wrap it up. I'll give them like their own series. But since I kind of already like planned them to like interweave with each other. It's really hard to develop these separate storylines with like this evolving world and these people in this world, and also making sure that like when they intersect chronologically it makes sense. And if I'm extending the series and making it longer, okay, now like if they've met this other character and they've crossed over, what happens like after that, and would readers still be able to follow what's happening if they only read one of the series and not the other? So I definitely like made it more complex than I was initially planning, but it's also like as a mind that loves like logic and puzzles and mathy things, it's been kind of fun to puzzle out as well.
That's so interesting because you were talking about before you were querying and trying to figure out like the trying to like gamify writing, and then you kind of had fun, and then you kind of found success in your niche and your people, and now you have to go back to the old way where you're like, okay, this all needs to make sense for the reader, and I wanted to build it out
Yeah.
again. Yeah.
Yeah, and I gotta say, it's like way different, like writing for an active viewership and readership than writing for like a perceived viewership and
Mm-hmm.
readership when you're writing for an agent, because traditional publishing takes so long, and you're writing a book understanding that maybe it will take a year to find an agent, and then maybe it will take another year to find a publisher, and then maybe they will publish it in another 2 years. So it's like you have no idea, like even if it will be successful, and you're like, should I write a whole series? If it fails after the first book, those other books will never see the light of day. Versus something like Royal Road,
Mm-hmm.
where you have this active feedback and people reading every single chapter you put out, and like getting that immediate, I mean, gratification in some ways,
Uh-huh.
people being like, oh, I can't wait to see what happens next. Like, that feels good. That makes you want to write more. And sometimes, people are like, oh, I can't wait until like XYZ happens. And I'm like, well, I've got X and Y planned, but not Z, although that does make sense. And then you're like, all right, do I like think I want to give that to the readers, like, since that's what the readers want? And you can like kind of decide if you want to like change directions with some of your stories. So that can be kind of fun, like to have that fluidity and ability to like change courses.
That's awesome. Yeah, have you ever gotten like a theory from a fan or something like that, and you thought to yourself, "Oh, I need to put this in the story. I need to figure out a way to put this immediately in the story somehow."
No, not theory wise. Like, I've got the lore pretty well like pegged down in my head, but there will be small things like someone's like, I really want to see like Kanin working on his glass magic and like learning how to make it stronger. And in my brain, I was like, well, I was planning on having him like learn what tempering and stuff is
Mm-hmm.
the next book, but then I was like, since so many people keep bringing this up, maybe I'll extend it beyond like just the one chapter I was originally planning on doing, and I'll make it more of an ongoing plot point because that seems to be what people want. So it's not exactly like redoing what I had planned, but it's kind of giving them more of what they want. So that's been fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, just to circle back because I feel like we've already talked about a couple things. You were saying how you had this idea of just from like a notebook. One thing I always like to know about people is their workflow. So, what is your workflow for writing? Are you a plotter, a pantser? Do you plan out arcs? Do you map out everything by chapter? Like, what do you kind of do?
I started as like a really hard pantser. Like, I just kind of made up everything on the fly, but that was years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more I've written and the more I've tried different methods, because I have like for some books in the past, like, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to plot out everything, I'm going to write it and see how it works. I just did not enjoy plotting everything, because by the time I plotted every little detail, when I went to write it, it was like, okay, the story's already done. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like kind of regurgitating it now. And so it kind of lost a little bit of its luster to me when I plotted every single point out. So I've landed on something in the middle, more of where I have a core concept, and I always have like a really strong idea of beginnings of stories. Those have always been like the easiest part for me, like probably the first act of any series. Like, I know exactly what I'm going to write, because I don't know, that's like the fun part for me. Like, when people are just like thrown into the world and have to discover like where they are and what they're doing and what they're capable of, that's
For
discovery
sure.
mode is really fun. So I always have a really strong first act in my head, and then I always have something at the end that I am shooting for. Like, I know where the book is going to end, so I know the start and I know the end, and then I'll jot these down and everything at least that I know is going to happen, I'll write down, and then there will be like huge blank spots
Mhm.
between,
How do we get
and
it?
then I'll be like, okay, well, there's this scene that would be really cool too, and I'll write that somewhere in the middle of like the blank area, and that kind of is like a goalpost to shoot for. So sometimes, like some of these books, I will start writing, and I only know the beginning, the end, and maybe like two scenes in the middle, and then as I'm writing, I write towards that next point where I know is going to happen, and
Mhm.
just kind of like naturally, how do I get there? Versus other books, the most recent Glass Kanin book that I wrote, I just actually finished writing the third book last night. So
Congratulations.
thank you. But that one was interesting because I really knew almost exactly chapter for chapter what was going to happen. And I think it's just because I'm 3 books in now and I'm really familiar with the world and the characters and the developing plot line. And I also know like overarching in the series where this whole series is headed to. So that's another like kind of bigger, more distant goalpost that I'm moving towards. But yeah, it was interesting. I think just because I'm more comfortable with the characters and more familiar with everyone, like I knew beat for beat what was going to happen a lot more naturally, and there was a lot less of those gaps and empty spaces in the plot. So we'll see what the product ends up looking like. I'm about to send it to beta readers as soon as I finish editing it, and we'll see if they can compare my more messy versions of plotting versus this one, which was a little bit more structured, and they can tell me if that works better or worse.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it sounds like you're writing two series at the same time, or two books. You have Friendly Fire, and you got Glass Cannon. Do you find it like easy to fall back into canon when you leave it
Yeah,
away for like a week or something like that?
I mean, I love writing canon. He was like the one that I just started writing as like the passion project because I just wanted to have fun. And so everything that I wrote was motivated by what will I have fun writing.
Mhm.
And so that one probably more than any other book is just like was just a delight to write, and I loved the characters that came out of that book. And so anytime I like switch back to canon, it's very easy for me to switch back to him just because so much fun, and I love the characters and their personalities.
You can like fall back
um
into it comfortably, like a chair or something like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I think the next time when I write the second like a little salty book, or when I write the next friendly fire book,
Mhm.
I'm going to reread the book just to like brush up not only on the things that happened but the voice I was using for that character, because all of my books are written in first person, so they're all very voicey and each character has their own distinct voice. And so it would just be good for me to refresh myself on the exact voice that I was using to make sure that it doesn't feel dissonant when I jump back into the next book.
Usually, I'll be honest with you. Usually, I don't love first person books. I really enjoyed reading your perspective on it because it felt like I was reading the character.
Could you tell that I don't write to market? I like looked at Lit RPG and it's like, yeah, everything is third person. And I was like, I'm gonna write a first person present tense book.
I'm literally, yeah, exactly. I'm gonna write an actual Glass Cannon book.
Yeah. That probably hurts myself, honestly. I think if I like more honed in on the exact tropes that people wanted and the exact market, I could have been a lot more successful with these first couple books. But again, that wasn't my goal. You know, my goal was just to enjoy myself and to take a break from writing to what other people wanted. So yeah, I don't really have any regrets in that. But I think whenever I start my next series, which will probably be in a couple of years because it's going to take me a couple of years to finish up all of these ones, I might switch to third person for that one and
Okay,
see how that does. But I just can't stay on one thing, you know.
that's totally
As you've
that's
seen, I've got
everybody.
like 3 or 4 books releasing at one time. I jump around just because like I don't know, I like different stuff, and I feel like I get bored if I just wrote one thing my whole life. So that's I switch between first person for some series and third person for others, which every author who does this as a job tells you not to do that. That's a bad idea. It's better to like stay consistent so that your readers keep getting like what they've come to expect from you. So I don't know, maybe I'll become more consistent one day, but right now I just enjoy jumping around.
At the same time, you've done pretty well for yourself going against the grain. So I would just say keep doing what you're doing. Honestly,
We'll see.
we'll see.
I'm publishing to Amazon next month, almost exactly 1 week from today in January. So we'll see how
Woohoo!
it translates to Amazon, since it's just all been on Royal Road so far.
What does that look like? Like the process of going from Royal Road to Amazon? Is there a lot more back end work when we're talking the Kindle release?
Yeah, so I signed a deal with Podium to do an audiobook, and they wanted to sign full rights, which means they would have taken ebook and trade as well. But at that stage, I had already commissioned my cover art, and I had already commissioned an editor to edit my
Hmm.
book. And so basically, what they could offer me was stuff that I had already done for myself, so I didn't really see the appeal of signing ebook and paperback as well. So I've worked with Podium to do the audiobook, which has been really cool, and I'm very excited for that. And I never expected going into this that I would have someone reaching out to, help make an audiobook of my story. So that's been wild. But that means that I'm also doing all of the other stuff on my own. So I'm doing all the marketing and advertising and formatting for ebook versus paperback, and getting the different layouts, and learning how to put up books on Amazon. And I've spent like the last year basically reading tons of books on Amazon and marketing and newsletters and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a huge learning experience for me on top of all the writing that I've been doing. But it's also been
Nice.
a lot of fun. Like
You
I
started building your own newsletter?
yeah, well, started is the strongest word in that sentence. So I do have a newsletter. I'm planning on sending out like the first real, actual, not just onboarding email this week, just to start warming the readers back up to. I'm going to be sending you something once a month. Um, yeah, it's been an interesting learning curve. That
That's a
was
lot.
actually it was a lot. I was
It's a
not
lot.
expecting newsletters to be that involved.
It's so involved, and there's all these gurus and everybody. It's a lot, and it just
Yeah,
sounds like you're working really hard. And I wish you all the best.
thank you.
I'm sure it's gonna go great. I'm sure it's gonna go better than expected. Just breathe.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I went into this no expectations, right? Like I said, I just wanted to do this for fun, to do something different, to just enjoy myself. And I
Yeah.
have done that. Over the last year, I have really enjoyed, launching these books onto Royal Road and gaining readers. And I started a Discord, and now there's about 100 people in my Discord. And I've joined other Discords that are like very specific to lit RPG, or I'm in one that's like queer authors on
Hmm.
Royal Road, and it's been so cool to just like find these communities that I never expected to be in, and it's so supportive,
So
both
supportive.
other authors and readers, just like they want to see you succeed, and that's been wonderful.
Yeah, it's weird, right? It's kind of weird making friends online, eh?
Yeah, I really enjoy it.
Me too. It
I
just
like know
straight.
people all over the world.
Me and a couple of my author friends, we were playing Path of Exile. My partner walked in. And I was like, please, I'm talking to my internet friends, okay? Like,
They're just as legitimate as real
yeah.
life friends, okay?
So one thing I really wanted to ask you is because I found your writing so unique and your perspective so unique. What are some of the stories that have influenced you as like a writer and a reader? Like, what do you like to read? What did you like to read growing up? Where does this like funky style come from?
That's a great question. It is a funky style. Yeah, my
It's great.
stories are very kind of off the beaten path. I love well, I won't say I love body horror, but I really love the idea of characters being stuck in bodies that are different, that they're not used to, and now they've got to like, reinvent how they identify themselves, and kind of just exploring that whole, are you your body or your mind or both or
Mm-hmm.
neither? So that's so just a general theme that I really enjoy. So that shows up in a lot of the current books that I'm writing. Um, but also just I love this mixture of like fantasy that's kind of can be cozy and dark at the same time. And the best thing that I can think to compare it to is Studio Ghibli, like Spirited Away, where
Absolutely
it's
got
kind
that.
of dark and kind of weird, but also like kind of wholesome at the same time.
Yeah. That-
So that was a big influence on me for my childhood. I was really into Ghibli movies, and the kind of books that I read also reflected that. So Garth Nix is probably one of my favorite authors,
oh,
and growing up,
nice.
I read a lot of his. There's the Keys to the Kingdom book, which is about a kid who is given this magical key, and it lets him into a mansion that is an entire universe. So even though it's not an isekai, it is still like a portal fantasy, and I love portal fantasies. I love the idea of like these other realms that we don't currently know of or see that you can go and visit. And that story also, in a way, was about like kind of his identity evolving and him growing into like nigh omnipotent powers as well, and just a normal person. You know what happens when you are given the powers of a god. So that was a really fun, dark, interesting fantasy series that I grew up reading.
That's awesome. I got to check that out.
Yeah, it's good. And another series of his, the Abhorsen series, which is about good guy necromancers. Basically,
Okay.
they're all necromancers that are like trying to fight to keep the dead dead. And meanwhile, there's other dead are like coming up out of the ground, and so their whole job is to like try to maintain the peace in the kingdom. But they use bells as weapons, and so the bells have different like spells that they can cast, and the different bells have different effects and stuff. And it's such a creative, interesting, and again like a dark fantasy, but it's a twist on what you expect, because the necromancers are the good guys instead of the bad guys. So I love taking those expectations and turning them on their head.
The more and more you tell me about the series you like, when I was trying to describe your work, I was like, it's kind of like cozy existential crises. It's what it feels like.
Yeah, I'd say that's accurate.
Yeah. And it's like fun but dark, and I'm like, I just want to keep reading, and you have all these snarky characters and
Yeah, especially Kanin. He can be polarizing. Some people are like, all right, enough with the snark, or enough with the existential dread.
Actually, I do want to ask you about that as well. I found you have like really strong characters. Like all of your characters kind of sing through. Noli, Kanin, even in your new series and your old series. What do you do for writing characters? Do you plan out their arcs? How do you approach this kind of stuff?
It really depends on the book. So some of them I do have a general arc in mind. Like for Kanin, he before he got isekai, he was a kind of wannabe actor. He's dedicated his whole life to trying to be, breakthrough star, and he's very vain. He's very proud of his body, and his body is like his career. And then when he dies, now he's in a glass bottle, so he doesn't have the thing that he previously identified himself by. And so I knew that I wanted his arc to be about coming to accept that and coming to define himself not by his body but by his actions. And so that was kind of like the long-term goal I was heading towards, and that doesn't fully manifest in the first book, but it manifests and it kind of moves that way. That arc sort of develops over the next couple of books as well. So I had like that vague arc in mind. For Fire, it was something that happened a little bit more organically, and her arc is also a little bit less pronounced as well. It's kind of about family and acceptance.
Yep.
And that one was sort of, I just wrote that without a specific arc in mind. It just kind of allowed the characters to develop and allowed whatever themes sort of started to emerge from the story that I was writing to also develop. And then what I do, which is not what a lot of Royal Road readers do, or Royal Road authors do, is I actually edit the book first before I put it on Royal Road.
The whole thing?
The whole thing, yeah.
You write like 100,000 words and then edit everything?
Yeah, and then I start posting it.
Oh
So that's also probably why it comes off across as a little bit more polished. There's a little bit less grammar errors. But I edit it, and I edited with that. Okay, what is the theme that's emerged, and what's the kind of the character arc that's emerged? And then when I go back through to edit, I try to make that stronger and more pronounced, so that it wasn't like as meandering in the first draft. So it's kind of just like shaping up what was already there.
That's fantastic. And okay, who's your favorite character to write, and who's your least favorite character? Maybe that's the wrong question. Who do you struggle with the most to write?
That's a good question. My favorite character to write is probably Kanin.
Yeah.
I don't know. He just has such a strong personality, but it's a lot of fun to write, which is kind of the opposite of Fire, who is a quieter personality. She's very kind and compassionate and also logical. And God, I love writing logical characters. I love writing characters that are like super sciencey, and maybe that's just because I come from a science STEM background, but
Yeah.
I love it when characters like get super excited about, you know, something they have to dig into. But I would say that her voice was harder to write just because she was a little bit more subdued than kind of the over the top character that Kanin is. And in A Little Salty, Sal is also a very angry, passionate teenager, and so it was kind of easy to write that because I could just imagine being like an angry, impulsive teenager. Like it's easier to write things that are more emotion driven than things that are more subdued, because you don't have to like lean on subtext as much when
Hmm.
characters are very much like over the top and dramatic, versus, you know, if they're thinking about something quietly but they don't react strongly, the readers might not notice the subtext of what's going on there, and you might have to spell things out a little bit more clearly.
It's easier when people are like a bit not over the top, but it's easier to write characters that are big in their actions than like small and
Yeah,
subtle. Yeah.
yeah, I think so. For me
That's
anyway.
yeah, okay. So you kind of do a bit of both. So you plan out their arcs, you edit, and on the fly, I'm assuming some things just come to you and you add little details here and there, right?
A lot comes
Yeah.
to me on the fly. Yeah, tons of stuff. In fact, in the first book, Glass Kanin, Noli was completely made up, and she's the
Really?
major supporting character, not just of that book, but now like the whole series. She's the major reoccurring side character. And it's because, so I knew I was going to take this character and I was going to stuff his soul in a glass bottle, and he was not going to be able to talk because glass bottles can't talk. And I was like, this book is going to be so heavy on internals. It's just going to be him sitting there and thinking about things. I need someone to be there to communicate with him. And so I like just on the fly, I made up a character that got stuck with him in this predicament, and she gets stuck in the body of a clockwork toy octopus, and he's
Yep.
stuck in the body of an inkwell,
Yeah.
and they're both like in this together. And I think that also just made the story way more interesting and engaging by having these characters that can interact with each other. And Noli teaches Kanin how to do sign language, and that's the way that he initially learns how to communicate.
Hmm.
And without her, it just, I don't know, I think it would have not been as an interesting story. It wouldn't have been as much fun. It was just good to have that like external character for him to communicate and interact with. And she is such a bubbly, happy, optimistic character that it also worked really well to combat any of the, you know, existential sadness that Kanin was dealing with, because it would have just been too much and too depressing if it was just him wallowing in his own self-pity, you know, the whole time. So it was good to have a contrast to his character there.
That's yeah. That's really. I always loved all their interactions. Like I found them so fun to read. What one thing I really noticed about your writing too is with all your character scenes and all of your like developments, you're so good at pacing. I don't know how you did that, but it's like I don't know if you figured out the perfect way to have like these ups and downs of like okay, all this happens and then we think about it and we mull things over and we develop. Is that something that you practice, or does that just come from how you like your stories to be told?
I think that something that just kind of naturally emerged from reading tons of books and writing tons of
Okay.
books, because as I said, these weren't the first books that I wrote. These are just the first books that I'm publishing. And you know, I started writing when I was like, I don't know, before I was 10 years old. You know, I was writing like terrible like Star Wars fan fiction before I even knew what fan fiction was. I was like, I'm going to write about Yoda. So I've been writing my whole life, and I started taking it more seriously in my late teens than my early 20s. And I read a couple craft books around the time, but mostly it was just like from, I think just the more you read, the more you just internalize natural flows of stories. And you know, there's the big beats. You know, you've got your rising action and falling action. There's a climax. There's a midpoint. Usually something dramatic happens at the midpoint. Everything builds to the climax. So those big general beats, you know, you kind of have in mind.
Hmm.
And when you're thinking of things to put in a book, naturally those events will fall somewhere along that scale, just instinctively. And then on a smaller level, I mean, each chapter is kind of its own book in that way. It
Yep.
has a similar structure where you have the introduction of a scene, then you've got it building towards something, and then there might be some big event in the middle or some turning point or some decision that's made, and then that leads towards the end, and the end is either going to be a resolution or a climax, or a cliffhanger or something like that. And so that it just kind of like naturally falls out of what you want to do. Each scene will kind of just take that shape. I know that's a really wishy-washy answer because it's like, I don't know, you just internalize it.
Yeah, I mean, now that we've spoken, I can kind of tell that like your pacing kind of lends itself on your personality. Like where we go, you talk about, you go in one direction, then you go in another direction, but it kind of all makes sense a little bit like towards the end. Like I really enjoyed getting towards like later in your work, especially Glass Kanin, because like, oh, this is now like I see where we're going with this, and then all the fun stuff that happens towards the end, at least for me.
Yeah, I mean, and I've had a lot of fun writing it too, and I think some of that enthusiasm comes through. I think when you're enjoying what you're writing, you're going to produce something that will be more enjoyable to the readers too than if you are plodding away at something that you just don't really care about or are not engaged with. I think some of that enthusiasm or lack of enthusiasm will kind of infect what you're writing.
That's probably what happened with those first works, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I really cared a lot about those first works, but
okay.
It got to a point where, yeah, when I was editing those works, I was editing them with the agents and the publishers in mind. And I think if I went back and did that, I don't know, I might revisit some of my earlier drafts, because I save each draft as a different document. And I might be interested to revisit like what did draft 1 look like versus draft 5, and see what I changed. And maybe I should have kept some of those early things.
Yeah, I mean, trust your eye. Don't trust the editor or the publisher's eye. I mean, you've done fantastically for yourself, right?
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with the progress that I've made this year. The whole thing was just, it was almost an experiment. I was like, just to see what happens and have fun. And the goal someday is, of course, to be a full-time author, but I never expected that to happen in a year. I just expected, well, let's see what happens when I do try this. And I mentioned earlier that I've kind of got like a sciencey, logic-y mind, and I love like planning things out and making graphs and spreadsheets, which probably lends really well to lit RPG.
Yeah.
But I like making those plans and being like, okay, if I can write this many words a day, how many books can I write in a year? And if I write this many books in a year, how long would it take to have 10 books out or whatever? And I don't know, I love research, and I look up like, okay, on average, how much do people make when they have this many books out? And all right, maybe in 5 years I could go full time if I keep, writing at the current states. I don't know. That's fun for me. That probably sounds like horrible for a lot of people who don't enjoy numbers crunching, but
yeah,
I love planning and making spreadsheets.
That's do you have those spreadsheets, or are they just like one-off calculations that you do in Excel?
Oh no, I have so many spreadsheets.
Actually,
each of the spreadsheets has different tabs, and each of the tabs dedicated to something else.
That's I not to go on. I might cut this part out, just so you know. But I've been working on like because we did Inkathon in that Immersive Ink Discord, where we tracked like the whole Discord's words for the month of November for Write-a-thon. And we kind of just slapped it together, but we tracked over like 2 million words.
Dang, that's so good.
For the whole Discord,
wow.
Yeah, and it was like 50 people were tracking their words daily. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. So
yeah, and what is it, Council of the Eternal Hiatus? They also like have their word tracker that they've been doing.
Yeah,
so I like posting in there too, because and again, it's that whole numbers go up thing. I like tracking my word count, and yeah, I made one for a different group of friends too, who's like not on Royal Road, just like a different critique group that I'm in. And I was like, I'm gonna just make a yearly tracker, and just spend so much time just like throwing the tracker together and adding the pretty colors and the fancy equations so that it like pulls from each tab. And yeah,
you spend 3 days working on a tracker. You're like, oh, I should probably be writing.
Yeah, actually, that's exactly what happened. I was like, I need to finish this book tonight. I'm on the last chapter. And then I was like, oh, spent 3 hours making a word tracker instead.
So one thing I really want to know about too is we talked a little bit about your science background. How do you think that lends to your writing? Do you feel like it makes you better with numbers in that perspective, or maybe writing characters that are logic oriented, or how they think through problems. Like, how has it affected your writing?
So before Glass Cannon,
Hmm.
I really loved writing scientist characters. Like that was my guilty pleasure. Is I'd write the main character was some kind of scientist, and they'd be obsessed with whatever their special interest is, and they're always like excitable and would get buried in their work. And I don't know, I just really like that trend. So Glass Cannon was the opposite. He is not a science character at all, and so
Hmm.
that was fun for me because I mentioned before I just like writing things that are different and switching tracks and doing something that's completely different from what I'm used to. So part of the reason why he was not a science logic-y character is because I wanted to do something very different, and that was fun. It was fresh, and Friendly Fire has kind of gone back in that sense that she is an aerospace engineer, which is also what I am. Although I work on the spaceship side of things, and for her, she is the airplane side of things. So it was a bit different,
Yep.
but we would have taken the same undergraduate classes.
Okay. I was gonna say,
So
like, to me, I don't know how different they are, but I'm assuming you're the professional here. Probably extremely different.
they're very different, yeah. Everything with flight is based on drag and turbulence and air resistance, and basically none of that is relevant to rockets. I mean, it's like it's a little bit relevant, but barely. So they're very different things. Like you're learning orbital dynamics if you're on the space side of things. That's orbital dynamics is not relevant when you're designing an airfoil. So in that sense, like we have very different career paths, but
Okay.
I at least had like some of the basics. Some of the basic
Yep.
engineering classes are all the same. We all took like thermodynamics and that kind of stuff. So it was fun to use a little bit of that knowledge when I was writing Friendly Fire. Is I could kind of go back to like my undergraduate studies and pull some of that knowledge out just to make her seem a little bit smarter.
That's so funny. That's okay. So you're pulling from like your old university courses and things like that.
Yeah, I even had the textbooks here because, God, those
Oh.
were so expensive. I was like, I'm not selling these back. I paid an arm and a leg for these textbooks. So I have them, but I never like cracked it open for fire. I was like, if I need to, I can look up an equation. And I was like, nah, I'm not going that deep.
You're like, no, 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 no. Readers are not gonna like that. Well, they might.
Yeah, you never know. There will always be a subset of readers that want you to go crunchier.
Yeah, and that's just to change perspectives a little bit. One thing I wanted to ask you about is the kind of themes that you want to write about. Do you put in a perspective, or do you plan these things out with like existential crises and loving yourself and finding hope and struggling with who you are? Like, are those kinds of topics that you want to address in your writing, or is that something that just comes naturally with the characters?
I feel like, in general, I don't go into a book with a specific theme in mind.
Okay.
Um, Again, because I edit before I publish, so
Yeah.
you're not just getting the first draft, but I allow themes to emerge from the first draft.
Hmm.
And then when I look back and see, okay, what was the major theme that came out of this, then I hone in on that and I strengthen it. So that it doesn't just seem kind of random and appearing out of nowhere. But in general, as well, there's probably so going into the canon series specifically, I knew that they were all going to be isekai books.
Yep.
Um, and they all of these characters are assigned a role when they are summoned to this other world, and
Hmm.
Canon's role is a homunculus, which is an artificial person. And part of it is him figuring out like what the heck does this role mean, but it's basically this system, the magic system, forcing them to do something that meets the requirements of that role. And so for Friendly Fire, her role is the Dark Lord,
Hmm.
and she finds out that she has to protect her kingdom. And so Canon is tied to needing to do the orders of the wizard that summoned him because he's designed to be a servant. And Fire's role is, I guess, in a different way, a servant of her kingdom. And so there's inherently like a fate versus free will theme that comes out of all of that. And so I went in knowing that they were all going to have roles, and that was going to inherently be a theme that would arise from that kind of premise. So I would say in that sense, I knew that like fate versus free will, these characters, are they going to fight their role? Are they going to accept their role? Are they going to bend the rules of their role to what they want to do. That was going to be a major theme in all of these books. But apart from that kind of overarching series theme, like I said, the individual themes of the books kind of mostly emerged naturally from the character arcs and the plot that happens in those books.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Your answers are so good, Kia. It's so well thought out. It's like on the fly too. It's impressive.
I hope I sound partly intelligent.
No, you sound so
questions
intelligent. It's like you put so much thought into all your answers. Oh my goodness, it's so excellent.
Can you tell that I enjoy talking about books?
Yeah.
Books are
Yeah. What are you reading right now in Royal Road? Are you just too busy writing?
What I'm reading right now is not on Royal Road. I'm reading the most recent Dungeon Crawler Carl book.
Oh my god! How close are you to the end?
I haven't finished it yet. I actually had to put it on the back burner to finish this current book because I was on deadline. So I was like, I need to finish writing canon. So I like forced myself to stop binge reading every night because otherwise nothing would get done until I'd finish reading it. So
I'm not going to spoil it for you. It gets wacky. It's always wacky. But
I mean, I love wacky. Wacky's my jam.
That's like Dungeon Crawler Carl is the one book I always recommend to people to get into lit RPG in like Royal Road.
Oh, you're setting a high bar then.
I know, but I think the first book is so fun and approachable in Dungeon Crawler Carl, so I think it like hooks people in, you know?
Yeah, it was fun.
Okay. Is there anything that you would like to shout out with regards to yourself or Royal Road or any kind of media that you really want to just shout out that people should look at?
Shout out, you should all go read Silver Lining's book Edge Cases, which the series just finished publishing on Amazon. I really enjoyed it. I haven't finished it yet. I'm still only partway through the series, but I've really been enjoying what I've read so far. And it also has some queer characters in it, which I feel like are sorely lacking in the lit RPG genre, especially queer male characters. So just a shout out to Silver Linings. He's an awesome person, and he writes really great stories. So you guys should go read that.
Yeah, I didn't get the chance to ask you that. I did want to ask you about queer rep in the genre. You kind of gave a little bit of an answer there, but do you feel like it's important to have characters that are queer, or are you just trying to make real characters? Do you want to add anything to that?
I think it's important for all sorts of characters to exist in fiction, you know? I mean, I'm queer, which is why I write a lot of queer characters into my stories, because it's just natural to, you know, put more of what I want to see into the world. But yeah, I think like lit RPG especially is a very kind of what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. A lot of the characters tend to be straight, male, and white. And they get less white when you get into like Zhanjia and other, you know, more kind of Chinese-inspired stories. But yeah, I mean, we're seeing more female main characters in lit RPG, which is good. So that's becoming more common. And I hope we can also see more minorities show up in lit RPG, just because, you know, it's if you are part of those group, it's just really cool to see yourself exist in that fiction instead of like wondering what it would be like to see someone like you in that fiction, you know. That's probably why I liked Garth Nix as well growing up. You know, there's not a lot of fantasy books, especially 30 years ago, that were action fantasy and starred a female main character. Most of them were male main characters. So it was just satisfying to see someone like yourself represented in fiction. You know, it makes you feel less of like an outsider, and that more that people care about your existence, and that, you know, you can find these characters more relatable too. So it's great to just see yourself exist in a genre. So that's kind of partly why I put more queer characters and just a wide spectrum of queer characters in my work too. You know, Kanin is gay, Friendly Fire, she's trans, a little salty, she's Arrow Ace, and Knight in Shining Armor, they're going to be non-binary. So I don't know, I like writing different things that is not as common, and I know that some people who have commented on it feel seen and like are really happy to see themselves exist in this genre.
That's awesome.
And that just like it makes me feel really good, you know, that like other people are like, finally, you know, I really wanted to see a gay main character, and there's not many in lit RPG. I'm not the first, but there's not a lot of others. So
Now you're the writer that's providing those stories, right? You said that you wanted to read more of those stories when you were younger or when you were
yeah,
finding stories. Now you're providing those stories, so that's awesome.
yeah, and I like to think that that will help, you know, other people who want to see that in fiction. They will have it there, so they don't have to just like always wonder, oh, you know, it'd be cool if someone like me existed.
I do want to ask, and I can always cut this out too. Just like, have you experienced any backlash because you have queer characters or trans
Oh yeah,
characters? Yeah.
absolutely.
Oh,
You
in
don't
the
have to cut this
comments.
out. You don't have to cut this out.
Okay.
This is a yeah, it's a problem. You know, especially trans characters, especially and gay male characters. So there's a trend. Not just in RPG, but like in society in general, that lesbian characters are kind of given more room than gay male characters. So, you know, a lot of it I think is part of it is a fetishization of female characters. You know, if the consumers are male and they see, you know, two lesbians hooking up, they're like, oh yeah, that's great. But then they see two men hook up and it makes them uncomfortable and they don't like it. And instead of like digging into why that makes them uncomfortable to see someone who's, you know, just different from them, they'll leave a, you know, 0.5 star
Yeah.
rating on your story. So yeah, I got it especially with Kanin because he's gay, and with Fire because she's trans. And I haven't really seen much at all pushback with Salty for being Arrow Ace. I think that's also more common just because lit RPG likes to not have any romance.
Mm-hmm.
Some people like romance in lit RPG, but there's a lot of lit RPG readers that just want to see numbers go up. They don't want to deal with the relationships, so they're fine with, you know, a character not having any relationships. We'll see how Nye does. I feel like non-binary characters are extremely rare in this genre. So
I would say so.
We'll see how they do.
I would say so, and I'm sure there's going to be an audience for it. But yeah, how do you deal with some of the pushback? Do you just ignore the comments? Do you delete them? You know, I know there's other authors that are starting out that want to include queer characters. So
yeah, if it's a hateful comment, I will delete it just because I don't want my readers to see it, and I don't want them to feel attacked because they come to this place to read something that they identify with and makes them happy, and you know, I don't want a comment like that to spoil their day. So I will delete comments that are hateful, specifically about being queer. If it's like they hate the character for just because he's whiny, all right, whatever, you know. I'll leave that on. You're allowed to hate him for that, you know. So yeah, but I mostly like, I try to keep in mind the mental health of the people who are reading it.
Yeah, I mean that's I think a really good approach. And I know it just must be kind of rough because you open up your author dashboard and you get like the big stream of comments right there, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah, it's impossible to avoid.
Yeah.
And I'll admit myself that like sometimes, particularly like hateful or mean comment, like, oh man, it kills your motivation for a day. So I really try to not let it get to me, and I try to detach. And I knew going in, I knew that queer characters were not common in an RPG, and I knew that there would be some people that would be mad and angry about it. So I wasn't naive in that regard, but sometimes, you know, you get caught off guard. You're going into like, you know, check your email and you're in a good mood, and then all of a sudden you see this person that's like, I didn't want to see this gay crap in my story, you know, God. DNF, and they like leave, and it's like, it kind of hurts a little bit, but yeah, you can't let your happiness be defined by these very few individuals, because the majority of people are great. Yeah. And the people who leave hateful comments like that are in the vast minority. And so you have to remind yourself of that, you know, there's thousands of people reading your story every day, and you get one of these mean comments. So you just can't let yourself wallow in that. I don't want my success and my happiness to be impacted by one upset individual on the internet, you know?
Of course. Okay, so you'd recommend authors that are publishing with queer characters on Royal Road, or different kinds of characters, any kind of characters, to just ignore the comments, basically.
If you can, it's everything is so subjective. Like
Yeah.
what I can ignore is different from what somebody else can ignore.
Hmm.
I do know of a trans Royal Road author who recently has pulled all of her work from Royal Road because it was just too much,
Oh
and
goodness.
the negativity, she couldn't handle it. So it what I say is about me and my personality and how I'm able to handle things, but I don't want to give advice to other people
Hmm.
that if especially if they're more affected by comments like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to tell them to just, well, you just got to power through.
No, I get
You
you.
got to develop thicker skin. But
You
yeah,
sound like my
everyone's different.
grandfather.
Yeah. So if you can, I think it's a good idea to, not view comments and to turn off ratings so you don't see, if you got a bad review or
Hmm.
whatever. I think, especially if you're very affected by that, I think that's a good idea to just avoid it as much as possible. But there will also be people who will not be able to hold themselves back from looking,
Hmm.
which is completely legitimate. Like that was definitely me the first like couple of months I started publishing. I could not stop myself. I just wanted to see what people were saying, and I wanted to engage in the comments. And a lot of authors tell you not to do that, and that is probably good advice that you should not do that. But it's
Really? Just don't
one
even
thing.
reply.
Yeah, I mean, it also depends on like how big of an audience you have.
Hmm.
But once it grows past a certain point, like the conversations that are going to happen in the comments section will be natural and they will occur within each other, and you aren't needed to spur the conversation. And so you can kind of just let them discuss among themselves things that are happening. Um, and yeah, you're not necessary. Like they're here to consume and enjoy and share ideas, and you don't want to go in there and like spoil something or shoot something down or stop conversation. So I will go and leave comments that's like, thank you so much, if people say something really nice, or if they ask me a question, I will go and reply to that. But if there's two people talking back and forth, I kind of just let them do their own thing.
I can't help myself, Kia. Every time I get a comment,
It's
I'm like,
hard.
I need to be like, thank you.
Yeah, I will say I got a lot more comments on Friendly Fire than I did on Canon. So I think if things continue as they are, Friendly Fire is going to overtake Canon as my most popular book. Um, and that has helped curb my engagement a little bit,
Hmm.
just because there are so many comments coming into those sections that like I couldn't keep up with them and continue to write every day. Like you gotta like pick what you spend your time on.
Oh yeah.
So it's yeah, if you only get like one comment a day, it's like really easy to go and address that comment. But if you're getting like 30 or 40 comments, then I just let them be.
I feel like half the authors just spend like half their day on Discord, just like
Oh, I do
chatting.
too. I spend a lot of time on Discord. I mean, like I said, there's a great community on
Yeah, there
Discord,
is.
both with readers and writers. I love the community there, but I have to limit myself. I have to decide when is my writing time and when is my fun time. And during the writing hours, I gotta not be on Discord all the time.
But all these Discords have writing bots that do
I
sprints.
know.
I know, and
That's
you have to
true.
compete.
I have recently purchased a app for my computer called Spirit City Lo-Fi, and it just plays lo-fi music, and it's like a little setup like a Sims almost, where you like have your house and your person in it, and you can dress them up and customize your house, but it plays music, and you can set timers and you can set goals and you can have like cross things off for the day. And so that has been helpful to get me away from like the Discord writing bots, because then I'm in Discord and then I'm interacting with my friends. And this one application is just by myself, and I can ignore that. I can close the Discord tab and ignore it, and not get the little boop notification. So that's been helpful. It's just creating that level of separation.
Okay, you're the third person that has recommended me. It's called Spirited Lo-Fi.
Spirit City
Spirit
Lo-Fi.
City Lo-Fi. You're the third person that's talked about this, and I'm gonna buy it today.
I have been telling all my friends, so it could have originated from me.
I think yeah, you were one of them when we were chatting on Discord, but there's been
Yeah.
others, and now I need to buy it.
I mean, it's not like the end all be all, but it is a cute, simple, just writing app.
Yeah.
Well, it's technically for any kind of chores or tasks, but I
Okay.
use it for writing. So
Okay. Since we're on the topic of tools, what kind of tools do you use for writing? Like, what's your schedule like? Do you try to do like 2,000 words a day when you're writing your stories before you edit? 3,000. You have weekly goals. You're one of those people?
yeah, so In the past, I set like daily word count goals that
Okay.
were just like my minimum, and I didn't hit them every day. Like I didn't try to like force myself. If I had other things going on in my life, I allowed myself the grace of like, okay, I'm gonna go hang out with friends today. You know, I
Hmm.
don't need to be writing every day. But originally, it was 1,000 words a day was my goal, which for me is a little bit under half of a chapter, because most of my chapters are about 2,500 words on average. When I was on deadline to finish the third canon book because I need to get it to Podium in
Hmm.
order to create the audiobook, I told myself I was going to write a chapter a day. And so that was about twice what I was previously working on. And I did it, and it wasn't terrible. And it was
Okay.
kind of a good experience for me to be like, okay, I can push myself harder and I can write twice as much as I usually aim for,
Hmm.
and it doesn't kill me. Um, but I should also preface this with this summer, for the first time, finally, I got diagnosed with ADHD and I got some
Oh,
medication for it. And at no point previously in my life did I ever have medication for ADHD. And so I started taking that this summer. And of course, I've quantified how much that's helped my word count because, you know, I got to make all of the graphs and stuff. But it almost tripled my
are you
output.
serious?
Yeah, I think I went from like on average 600 words a day to on average 1,800 words a
Oh my
day.
goodness.
Yeah,
You
so
can literally see it in the
hey, it
graph.
works. Yeah. And it like it's not that I'm writing faster, it's just that I'm like able to sit down and write for a longer period of time before I get distracted and go do something else. Because I really rely on writing sprints. Like I have to force myself to get butt in chair and at the computer and get the distractions away from me, and then I'll write for 20 minutes. And by the time that 20 minutes is up, before I'd be like, okay, now I'm going to go do something else and get distracted. And now I can just keep writing after that 20-minute sprint is up. And so that's been helpful for just being able to concentrate on something for a longer period of time.
Yeah, one of my best friends in this space. He always talks about how he uses his ADHD like hyper focus mode. So he
Yeah.
can't write all the time, but what he writes, he's like, I'm gonna type out 8,000 words in like one day. Not that it's competition, but he always says it's my superpower.
Yeah. See, mine's the opposite of that. I can't like hyper focus on writing. Like I just constantly get
Yeah.
distracted. So it's been hard to write when you get distracted every 20 minutes.
Hmm.
And it's a little bit easier now, but I still have to make myself sit down and start. And once I start, I can, you know, I really enjoy it. But that initial getting myself to start can be hard because I have to ignore all the distractions. Yeah, well, yeah, actually, it affects my appetite too.
100%.
I will stop eating for several hours after I take my pill, and so I have to like, I intentionally take it at the end of a meal so that I don't forget to like eat that day.
Yeah, and like a couple of my friends, they all joke like, "Oh, I had my Vyvanse and coffee for breakfast." I'm like, no, like you
You
can't
gotta
say
eat something.
you can't say that. Like it's funny,
Yeah,
but it's like funny in the wrong way. Where it's like,
yeah,
please worry about your health, you know.
all right.
But
Take care of yourself.
that's fantastic that you figured that out, eh?
Yeah, it's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
I actually really struggled in undergrad as a result of that, like just the focus that was needed for my classes and for studying, and all of that. So it's been great now. Like I'm like, oh man, how much better could I have done at school if I'd had something to help me out?
Same here, honestly. Same here. Like I just completely ignored it during university, and I was like, oh, I don't need that. I'm gonna go like just take philosophy classes and meditate. Like no, I probably needed medication.
Right.
Like I
Yeah.
needed to take my medication. I would have been fine.
Yeah, I know. That's what my previous doctor told me. She's like, "Have you tried mindfulness?" I was like, "That's not.
Have you tried?
Thanks, but that's not gonna solve it."
Have you tried just like not fidgeting? No. What do you mean?
Right? Oh yeah, I got the leg that just like constantly bounces up and down.
The Jimmy leg, we call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Jimmy leg. But okay. Do you want to end the recording here? Is there anything else you want to add? Like I'm gonna add like a sign off. You want to plug your book? You want to plug anything? Like I'll splice together this audio in a way that like it sounds natural too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, just as like I guess a final plug is Glass Kanin will be publishing on January 14th, 2025, which
Woo!
is yeah, about a month from when we're recording this. I'm not sure when it will release, but yeah, looking forward to that. That'll be the first book that I publish to Amazon and Audible and all those platforms. So we'll see how the next year goes.
Kia, thank you so much. It's gonna do great. You're going to do fantastic on Amazon. I have no doubt in my mind.
I don't need it to do great. Like, I just need to use it to learn to do better next time. That's kind of how I see it. Like, I have had a blast writing it. I'm looking forward to what will happen when I publish it. I'm looking forward to, like, all of the advertising that's going to go into that, because I just love learning new things. So I'm just excited to see what will happen, honestly.
Yeah. Do you make your own ads for the ebooks?
Yes. I've done ads on Royal Road, and I'll be doing ads on Amazon and Facebook next month.
I've heard Facebook ads perform way better than people think.
We'll see. Yeah. But like I said, that's the whole thing is about, like, just learning new skills and trying new things, and that's what I love. So
It's a progressive mindset. There you go.
it's fun. always doing something new.
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you, Kia. And everybody, make sure you check out Kia's books on Amazon when they release.